Aang stood on the bow of the Royal Fire Nation airship. They were approaching the North Pole and soon would be on their way to the world Azula was currently in. He was thinking about what Avatar Roku had told him earlier on his journey. Was Avatar Roku right? Was Azula just a victim to her circumstances? Aang looked out into the air and sighed. He didn't know what to think. The first time he met Azula, she had been trying to kill him and his friends. The next time they met, she had nearly killed him. Every meeting, thereafter, consisted of Azula trying to kill him and his friends again. After her fight with Zuko for the final time, she lost her mind. This is the Azula that Aang had known, and he couldn't imagine her being any different. Yet he was taught that everyone deserves a chance to change, but it was their choice to change. What should I do? Aang said out loud as he looked out. Am I doing the right thing? He knew he wouldn't get an answer, but he felt better letting it out. He wondered how Azula was doing in this new world. With Azula. Azula had finished crying in Yoshino's arms and was drying her eyes. She looked up at Yoshino and saw a caring look on the older woman's face. Azula tried to understand the look, but she couldn't. She had never seen this look on her mother at all. Her mother always looked at her with disappointment or anger. The look that Yoshino was giving was filled with caring and concern. Yoshino looked down at Azula. Are you okay, dear? She asked with concern in her voice. Azula slowly nodded. Yes, she replied quietly. Yoshino smiled and slowly stood up. That's good, she stated in a motherly tone. Now let's get some food in you. Azula just nodded and slowly rose, only to lose the strength in her arms. Yoshino caught her. Let me help you, dear. Azula allowed Yoshino to help her up and lead her down to the kitchen. Azula watched Yoshino in wonder. Is this what a true mother would do? With Naruto. Naruto walked into Tsunade's office, a bit annoyed at being called in. He didn't want to leave Azula alone for too long, even with Yoshino watching her. He always felt better when she was near and enjoyed her smiles. So he hoped Tsunade just wanted to visit and that was it. Hi Bachan, he said as he stood in front of her. What can I do for you? Tsunade looked at Naruto, a serious look on her face. A meeting of Kages has been announced. She stated. All of the Kages have requested that you be there. Naruto stared at Tsunade in shock. He wasn't expecting this. He thought he was going to give a report on how Azula doing. He didn't want to leave now, Azula needed him. Do I really have to go? Naruto stated in a nervous tone. Tsunade just nodded. You have to, Tsunade stated in her Hokage tone. This is a demand by all the Kages. Naruto frowned. But what about Azula? He asked, worried. I can't leave her alone by herself. We don't know what could happen. She could regress back to her former self. Tsunade saw the look of worry on his face. She knew that he didn't want to leave Azula alone, but he was needed at the Kage meeting. I understand your concerns, she said with a calming voice. But I will have someone who is very capable to watch her. This wasn't helping Naruto to alleviate his fears. He didn't think there was anyone capable to watch Azula and help her heal as well as him. Is there anything else, Bachan? Naruto asked, disappointed. We leave tomorrow, Tsunade replied and Naruto turned to leave the office. He slammed the door behind him as he walked out, making Tsunade flinch. She sighed to herself. I knew this was going to be a bad day, she stated in a tired tone, pulling out a bottle of sake and pouring herself a glass. Naruto stormed down the road toward home, angered by his most recent orders. He told her that he would always be by her side when she needed him. Now he was leaving her alone. What was so important that he needed to temporarily abandon his charge? He slowly watched as his home came into view. He stopped in front of the front door and stood there, unsure of his next step. He slowly turned and headed back into town. He wanted nothing more than to have time to himself and wondered who he could leave Azula with, someone he could trust. The only person he could think of was Inoichi, but he was too busy. Naruto stopped in front of the memorial stone feeling defeated. There is no one I can leave Azula with, he decided. She not yet ready to be around other people. Hugh listened to Naruto as he fought with himself. Naruto, she called from inside the seal. Come talk to Big Sis. Naruto slowly nodded and sat down in front of the memorial stone. He started to meditate and soon found himself standing in front of Q's cottage. He slowly entered and found Q sitting on the love seat next to the bay windows in front of the cottage. She smiled at her little brother and motioned for him to sit down. Naruto sat down next to Q and looked longingly out the window. What's wrong? Q asked, concerned. Naruto faced her. You should already know, he replied quickly. Q nodded. I know, but just the same, I want to hear you say it, she stated, comforting. It is always better to say it aloud to someone. There's a meeting of the Kage in a few days, and all the Kages have requested that I be in attendance. Naruto struggled with the words, as if they were poison. Since I have to go, I have to leave Azula by herself or with someone I trust. Unfortunately, with Azula in her current mental state, I don't trust her with anyone but Inoichi, but he is very busy with his job at the interrogation department. I don't know what to do. Naruto put his head in his hands and let out a sigh. Hugh just patted him on the back, trying to comfort him. You will find someone. I know you will. Naruto looked at Q, a small smile on his face. Thanks Q, feeling a bit of relief. First you need to tell Azula that you're leaving, and then worry about finding someone to look after her, Q stated constructively. Naruto paled at this. He was not looking forward to going home. A few hours later. Naruto walked slowly into the house, hoping Azula was okay. He entered the living room. Finding it empty, he began to worry. Picking up his pace, he searched the other rooms of the house. He quickly entered the kitchen to a big surprise. Yoshino was standing next to Azula, teaching Azula the correct way to chop carrots. He watched as Azula concentrated on the task at hand, while Yoshino watched over her. Azula finished cutting the carrot and looked to Yoshino for approval, ready to hear all of the reasons why she did a bad job. Yoshino looked over the carrot slices with a practice eye. You're a natural, she said to Azula, grinning. Are you sure you never had training? Azula's face was blank for a moment as she tried to process what Yoshino had said. This teacher had not given her a list of grievances. She hardly received praise this positive before. Azula looked at Yoshino, who just smiled at her. I have no formal training in making food, Azula said, humbly. Most of my food back home was prepared by the royal chef. Interesting, she replied, surprised. I hope this is not too tedious to you. I wouldn't want to teach you something you wouldn't like to learn. Azula shook her head. I like it, she replied quickly. It feels nice. Yoshino smiled. Well then, let's continue, she said, excitedly. Now that you've cut the carrots, we need to put them in the pot on the stove. Now, pick up the cutting board and walk it over to the stove. Azula nodded and picked up the board as carefully as she could. She walked over and poured the content into the pot. Good job, Yoshino said in a motherly tone. Now we let the pot simmer and then we will have chicken stew. We just need to stir it and mix everything together. Will you like to stir? Azula nodded and Yoshino handed her the ladle. Now stir it slowly. Make sure to keep it constant. Azula started to stir the stew with Yoshino watching. She never expected to be learning to cook, but found it surprisingly enjoyable. She didn't know if it was making her own meals, or having Yoshino show her how to do it. It was more than her real mother had ever done for her. Smells great, said a familiar voice. Azula turned to see Naruto standing there with a large smile on his face. Yoshino smiled at Naruto as Azula stood frozen by Naruto's presence. Welcome home, she said, in a calming tone. Did your meeting with the Hokage go well? Naruto just nodded, a frown on his face. It's fine, he said, angrily. Yoshino noticed that something was wrong, but didn't press him. Well, I need to get back to cooking, she stated and turned to look at Azula. Azula, dear, you can take a break. At the mention of her name, Azula came out of her stupor. She let go of the ladle and walked toward Naruto. She turned toward Yoshino. Thank you for the lesson, she stated, quietly. Yoshino nodded. A large smile spread across her face. You are very welcome, she replied. I would love to teach you more whenever we get the chance. Of course, Azula replied happily. Naruto caught wind of this and looked at Yoshino. Maybe finding someone to watch Azula won't be that hard, Naruto thought. He was amazed at how easily Azula bonded with Yoshino in such a short time. Azula had not been this open to anyone except Inoichi and himself. Azula walked over to Naruto. What did the Hokage need? She asked inquisitively. Naruto looked nervously at Azula. He took Azula's hand and led her to the back porch. He closed the door behind them so as not to be disturbed. He looked Azula in the eyes and sighed. The Hokage called me in to tell me that I will be accompanying her to a meeting with the other village Kage, he said, sadly. It is mandatory that I go to this meeting and I will have to leave you here in the village while I am gone. Azula looked at Naruto, fearful. You're leaving? She asked, shocked. Naruto slowly nodded. I have no choice, he stated, vainly trying to console her. I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. Azula didn't seem to hear him, already lost in her own thoughts. You're leaving me, she deadpanned. Just like all of the others that have come before you, I will be alone. That's right, Azula, Ozai's voice whispered with glee. He's leaving you like I did. He doesn't want to be with a pathetic girl. I'm alone, Azula cried, starting to shake. I'm alone. Yes. Ozai's voice shouted happily. You are alone. You need to curl up and wither away, like the trash you are. Azula felt a pair of arms wrap around her. You're not alone. Naruto shouted as he held her. I won't leave you alone for long. I will come back to you, I promise. Azula looked up at Naruto, a look of uncertainty on her face. How do I know you will come back, she replied, tears streaming down her face. How? Naruto looked at the distraught Azula, trying to think of way to comfort her. Suddenly an idea popped into Naruto's mind. He reached his hand up and took hold of his crystal necklace given to him by Tsunade. This is how, he said as he handed the necklace to Azula. This is a very important necklace to me. I am leaving it in your care till I get back. Azula looked at the necklace then back to Naruto. You will come back? She asked scared. Naruto pulled her into another hug. It is the promise of a lifetime, he replied, sincerely. Azula felt Naruto's warmth and looked at the necklace. She didn't know why, but she felt that Naruto would eventually return to her. You'd better come back, she said in a feisty tone as she rested her head on his chest. I wouldn't want to destroy such a beautiful necklace. Well, then I have to get back quick, won't I? He replied with a smile. Now, while I'm gone, you will be staying with someone I trust. Who is it then? She asked. Naruto gave her a sheepish smile. He didn't know what to say. I can answer that, said a familiar voice. They both turned to see Yoshino standing there with a motherly smile on her face. Lady Tsunade asked me to watch Azula while you were at the meeting. So, don't worry, she is good hands. Naruto nodded. A hint of happiness appeared on Azula's face. Thank you, Naruto stated, relieved. It's my pleasure, Yoshino replied, gladly. The next day. Naruto, Azula, and Yoshino walked toward the main gate. Azula's hand was buried in Naruto's hand as they walked, scared to let it go. Naruto was going to be gone for a while, one of her main lifelines. With him gone, she was even more vulnerable to attacks than before. She wished that he didn't have to go, but she knew that an order was an order and he couldn't refuse. She watched as the gates came into view, and squeezed Naruto's hand tightly, not wanting to let go of the warmth and protection he provided. Naruto squeezed Azula's hand in reassurance. He hated leaving her here on her own. He looked at the scared girl and then at Yoshino, hoping she would adequately be able to protect Azula. He watched as Tsunade and Shizune came into view, a slight frown on his face. Hello everyone, Shizune said smiling. How is everyone doing? Naruto gave her a small smile. Fine, he stated, sarcastically. Tsunade saw Azula as she clung to Naruto. She felt bad separating the pair, but Naruto was needed at this meeting. Also, she would be able to tease Naruto about his feelings for the young princess. Good, you're finally here, brat, she stated, bored. Let's get going. I have some important work to get to. Naruto glared at Tsunade. You're going to drink and gamble the entire way there, he corrected, annoyed. So, there is no hurry. Tsunade glared at Naruto. Cheeky brat, she replied, smirking. Now, say your goodbyes. We need to get going. Naruto sighed and turned toward Azula. Remember, be safe and listen to Yoshino, Naruto ordered. I'll be back as soon as the meeting is over. Azula looked at Naruto, still unwilling to turn him loose. She held his hand tightly and put her head against his chest. Please don't leave me alone, she pleaded, the fear evident in her voice. Naruto pulled Azula into a tight hug. I promised I would return to you, he whispered to her. I always keep my promises. Azula looked up at Naruto and slowly nodded. The pair broke apart and Azula watched as Naruto joined Tsunade and Shizune. He gave one final wave to Azula and Yoshino, then started to walk down the path away from the village. Azula watched as Naruto disappeared from view, her hand holding onto the crystal on the necklace. Yoshino stood next to Azula and put her hand on her shoulder in reassurance. He will come back to you, she said, knowingly. The hero always returns to his princess. Azula looked at Yoshino and nodded. Yoshino smiled. Now, let me show you where you will be staying. Yoshino led Azula toward the Nara compound. Azula looked over her temporary home. It was larger than her home with Naruto. She saw many deer roaming the compound. She watched as a mother doe guided her fawn toward some food. She was gentle in her prodding but didn't let her young one get distracted by the flowers on the other side of the field. Azula frowned at this. She began to realize that in all her memory, her mother never acted like a true mother should. Soon the deer disappeared into the trees and Azula continued to walk toward the main house on the compound. Yoshino opened the front door and led Azula inside. Welcome to my home, Yoshino said with a warm tone. I hope you will think of it as your second home. Now, let's get your things to your room. Azula followed Yoshino through the house and saw many pictures on the walls. She saw many with Yoshino and 2 males. She saw that everyone in the pictures were all smiles and happy, or at least Yoshino was. The 2 males looked like they would rather be sleeping than taking a picture. Yoshino noted where Azula's attention was currently held. That is my husband Shikaku and my son Shikamaru, she said with a fond voice. They are both lazy and good for nothing, but I love them even when they don't do what they need to. Azula just nodded and soon found herself in her new room. It was a decent-sized room with some nice furniture. I hope you like it, Yoshino said with a hint of anticipation in her voice. Azula looked around the room. It's nice, she stated quietly, and watched as Yoshino's face light up. Yoshino clapped her hand together. Well, I'll let you get settled in, she said. If you need me, I will be in the kitchen. Azula watched as Yoshino disappeared into the hallway and sat down on the bed. She was still a little nervous that Naruto was not there with her, but she felt that Yoshino would be willing to protect her, like a true mother would. Avatar World. Aang and the gang had settled into the palace of the Northern Water Tribe. They had arrived the day before and had been preparing to head to the other world. Sokka had sharpened his sword, which took him months to find, made sure his boomerang was in perfect shape, and gotten all of their supplies in order. Suki had made sure her weapons were properly sharpened as well. Zuko had gotten his double swords ready and had worked hard on keeping his fire bending in top form. Mei and Ty Lee had prepared in their own special way without letting the other in on it. Katara had gotten several bags of water ready, just in case she was unable to find a sufficient water source nearby. Toph was working on her forms. She wanted to perfect her metal bending. She didn't know what types of people were in the world they were going to, but she wanted to be ready for anything. Unfortunately for Toph, the supply of metal and earth in the Northern Water Tribe was not great. She had to practice on the old wreckage of a Fire Nation ship. She sighed as she finished her exercises. When is that dang spirit going to get us to this new place? Toph grumbled as she sat down on the old wreck. If I had my way, your group wouldn't be even going, said a female voice from behind her. Toph quickly stood up and turned to face the voice. She stomped her foot and sent out a feeling wave. She saw a small animal standing before her. Who the heck are you? She stated, annoyed. My name is Hina, the animal said in a calm tone. I am a fox spirit sent to you by Kami. Out of your entire group, you are the most down to earth, no pun intended. Toph nodded slowly, still suspicious of the fox. Okay then, talk, she replied, a bit curious about what this creature could have to say. Hina walked over to Toph and looked up at her. I am here to tell you to look at Azula with new vision, she stated. Azula is a broken person who was sent to the other world to heal and become better. Toph looked at Hina with a look of skepticism. Azula, change, that's laughable, she replied. Azula has done nothing but try to kill me and my friends. She can never change. Hina looked at Toph and shook her head. You only saw one part of Azula, she replied. Everyone has more than one side to them. It just takes looking past the side you already know, look underneath, for what is underneath. Have a good day. Toph watched as Hina walked away from her. She thought about what the fox had said. Was there really more to Azula than what she knew? She didn't know what to think about this, but she felt that the fox was telling the truth. What did she mean about looking at what is underneath? Toph said to herself as she walked back toward the palace. She just sighed and hoped she could eventually figure it out. She walked through the halls with a frown on her face. Dang ice, can't see anything. The next day, Aang and his friends stood next to the moon pond, in the spirit oasis, waiting on you to come down from the moon and lead them to the other world. Toph watched as everyone stood around, just happy to be on solid ground instead of ice. That the spirits for Earth, she said to herself, but then remembered Hina and frowned, stupid fox. She wished the fox had never spoken to her. She couldn't get the voice out of her mind, no matter how she tried. Is Azula really just the angry monster that tried to kill me? Toph thought as she tapped her foot on the ground. Or is she really someone entirely different? Toph didn't have any more time to think about this when the lake started to glow and Princess Yu, the moon spirit, rose from the water. Welcome everyone, she said in a calm tone. I hope your journey here was pleasant. Aang just smiled. It was very nice, he replied, a lot safer than the first time. Ain't that the truth, Sokka said, only to get hit by Katara. He glared at his sister but remained silent. I see you've gathered all who you feel are needed to go on this journey, you stated. Are you all prepared to go to the other world? Zuko nodded. Yes we are, he said confidently. We are ready to find Azula. One question, Moon Spirit, Toph said, surprising everyone. Can you tell us anything about the new world? You frowned. Unfortunately, I cannot, she replied in an angered tone. The moon of that world is unreachable for me. Why is that? Sokka stated, confused. You're the moon spirit, and if there's a moon, you're in charge of it. That is true, you said with a sad tone. But there is something very evil about that moon. I am only able to open a portal by it, for you. I cannot do anything more. Toph frowned. She wanted more information on this world. She hoped it would help her understand why Azula was sent there. You looked at everyone. I am opening the portal, everyone, be ready, she said and waved her hand over the pond. The water began to swirl around and change color. Soon a whirlpool was formed. Be safe, my friends, and I hope your mission is successful. Everyone looked at the portal, a little scared to start their adventure. Mai looked at Ty Lee and nodded. They were going to make sure their friend was happy. Ty Lee smiled and flipped into the portal. Everyone else watched as Mai followed close behind her, and soon no one was left in the spirit oasis. Toph hit the ground hard as she exited the portal. She hadn't expected such a bumpy ride. Stupid moon spirit, she muttered as she stood up. She quickly tapped her foot and sent out an earth-bending wave. She noted that she was in a forested area near a lake. She saw that Aang, Katara, Sokka, and Suki had been thrown into a pile a few feet away from him. Mai, Ty Lee, and Zuko were all standing and ready for battle. Is everyone okay? Zuko asked as he walked over to help the others. Great, Sokka said as he slowly stood up and swayed a bit. I feel like I drank 3 gallons of cactus juice. That would be scary, Katara stated with a shudder. You on cactus juice is not a pretty sight. Suki looked to Gang. Am I missing something? She asked, a bit confused. Toph walked over to her and patted her on the shoulder. Let's just say, you would rethink dating Sokka if you saw him on cactus juice, she stated in a knowing tone. Sokka overheard the conversation. Was I really that bad? He asked, worried. No, you were worse, Toph corrected. Sokka was soon kneeling on the ground, a dark cloud hanging over him. Suki went over to comfort her boyfriend while everyone gathered, getting their bearings and deciding what to do next. So, what now? Mai asked. We are here, but we have no idea where Azula is. How are we going to find her? Sokka seemed to suddenly appear out of nowhere. First, we need to find a village and see what we can learn about this world, he stated in an authoritative tone. Then we see if we can find any information on a crazy girl throwing around fire, and we'll have her. Okay, then how do we get back if we find Azula? Toph asked. I have no idea? Sokka said. Suddenly he began to panic. We can't go home. We are stuck here. No. Okay, Suki, we will have to start our life together here. Katara hit her brother on the head. Calm down, she ordered. Yui told me how open a portal to home after we find Azula. All I need is water and a full moon. Thank heavens, Sokka said as he hugged Katara tightly. Toph just sighed and began walking. Let's go, she stated as she walked through the trees. The sooner we find Azula, the sooner we can get back. Everyone nodded and followed after Toph. Toph walked quickly. Yes, the sooner I find Azula, the sooner I can see what the fox meant. Toph led the group at a brisk pace and they soon arrived at a clear path. We found the road great, Sokka said with a smile. Now we can find people. Thanks for stating the obvious, Toph stated with a sigh. Now we need to decide which way we head. Everyone began choosing sides when Toph felt someone coming down the road. It was horse-drawn wagon, from what she could tell. Soon it came into view and Sokka waved the wagon down. The wagon driver stopped and glared at Gang, the suspicion evident in his eyes. What do you want? He demanded in a harsh tone. We are lost and we're hoping you could point us toward the nearest town, Suki said in a calm tone. The wagon driver slowly nodded. Just head back that way, he stated, pointing toward the direction he had just come. You will reach the land of waves. It's not even a half a day's walk to get there. Thanks, Suki said, leading the group. Toph led up the rear, busily pondering what this new place had in store for them. SB. Azula slowly walked through the village toward the supermarket. It had been 2 days since Naruto had left the village, leaving her feeling more exposed than ever. Her first night alone, she was relentlessly assaulted by her father's voice. It was only due to Yoshino's timely intervention that she was able to survive the night. Azula thought of Yoshino and let a small smile appear on her face. Yoshino was the first older woman to provide loving support to her. It was so different from what she was grown up with. With Yoshino she felt safe and loved, even though she could be scary when her husband and son were around. She chuckled to herself as she remembered watching Yoshino chase her son around with a large frying pan. It was very amusing watching someone in pain. Yoshino had sent Azula to the grocery store by herself. She had been unable to go due to some clan business that needed her direct attention. The idea of being alone in the village made Azula a bit nervous, but Yoshino just smiled and pulled her into a loving hug. You will be fine, she said in a caring tone. You are strong, smart, and a good person. Don't let those, in your mind, tell you otherwise. Azula's eyes widened when she heard these words, unsure of how to respond. No one had ever said anything remotely positive to her except from those in the Fire Nation who were trying to suck up to her. She didn't believe the words at first, but the warmth that Yoshino emanated let Azula know that it was true. No, you are pathetic and weak, Ursa angrily stated in her mind. You are not strong. You're weak. Azula ignored Ursa's words and basked in Yoshino's kindness, the expression from a mother who truly cares. She walked the streets toward the grocery store, a list of things she needed, in her pocket. She watched as people passed, going about their business. They just walked past her like she was one of them. They didn't worship the ground she walked on. It was a different experience for her, but then again, no one knew she was a princess except Naruto, Tsunade, Inoichi, and Yoshino. As she walked, she failed to notice that someone was watching her. It was Ino Yamanaka, the daughter of Inoichi. Ino was on her way to buy some new clothes when she noticed Azula walking on her own. She watched Azula with interest. She knew little of this new rival for Naruto attention, but she planned on changing that, real soon. She followed Azula into the grocery store and watched her gather the items on the list. She seems normal enough, Ino thought to herself as she watched Azula look over the meat section. Something told Ino that there was more to this mysterious visitor. Azula had first appeared in the village 2 months ago, with Naruto at her side at all times. She had weekly counseling sessions with her father, so, obviously, something was wrong with her. Ino just wasn't sure what. Ino continued to observe Azula as she headed home. She smiled when she saw her enter the Nara clan home. A plan started to form in her mind as she walked away. First, she needed time to prepare, and then she would have all of the information required to defeat this rival. A week later, Azula woke up the next day with a yawn. The previous night's rest was one of the best she had had, on her own, in a long time. No nightmares came to her, and she was finally able to peacefully sleep on her own, for once. She rose from her covers, rubbed the sleep from her eyes, and felt Naruto's crystal bounce against her chest as she moved. She moved a hand to the crystal and held it tightly. It reminded her of the Naruto's promise, a promise she knew he was going to keep. Azula got out of her bed and prepared for the day. She quickly headed down to the kitchen and found Yoshino waiting for her. Yoshino had been teaching Azula all about the fine art of cooking, and Azula had to admit, she really did enjoy it. She was amazed at how various ingredients combined into an amazing dish. Before, when she was in the Fire Nation, she didn't care what effort went into preparing the food, just how it tasted. Now she could understand the joy of cooking and watching others and herself enjoy the meals. "So Azula, dear, what shall we make today?" Yoshino asked happily. Azula looked over the ingredients before her, indecisively. She began. Yoshino smiled. "Take your time, just pick what feels good to you." Azula nodded, a small smile gracing her face. She pondered for a while before finally settling on a carton of eggs. She then gathered a few pieces of bacon, some tomatoes, cilantro, ground pork, and banana peppers. She pulled a bowl down from the cabinets and slowly started to crack open 3 eggs. She quickly whisked them together, forming a smooth, yellow liquid. Azula then added a pinch of salt to the eggs, before heading for the stove. She got out a pan, placed a little oil in it and set it in the stove to heat up. Next she walked over to table and began to chop up the tomatoes and cilantro. She then cut the bacon into tiny pieces and set them aside. She checked to see if the pan was hot. As her hand passed over the flames from the burner, she couldn't help but miss the feeling of controlling the fire with her own hands. She couldn't allow herself to dwell on it and proceeded to pour the eggs, she had whisked earlier, into the pan. She then got a spatula and watched as the eggs cooked. She noted the cooked egg edges and added the tomatoes, cilantro, and banana peppers to the middle of the eggs. She then carefully folded over the eggs, encasing the veggies, and slowly flipped the omelet over. She then put in the cut-up bacon and let it cook next to the omelet. Soon the dish was done and the omelet was on a plate with freshly cooked bacon bits on the top. Yoshino looked over the dish, approvingly. "Very good, Azula," she said, excitedly. "This is very well made. Shall we dig in?" Azula nodded, picked up a fork and picked up a piece of the omelet. She took a bite and smiled. It had a good balance. The eggs were fluffy and filling. The veggies provided contrasting flavors and textures, and the bacon on the top added a sweet kick to the dish. This is amazing, Azula, Yoshino said as she finished another bite of the omelette. You're becoming quiet, the cook. Once Naruto gets a taste of your cooking, you will have him wrapped around your finger in no time. Azula nodded. A bit confused on how physically impossible it would be to have Naruto would be wrapped around her finger. Suddenly a knock was heard and Yoshino left to answer the door, leaving Azula alone in the kitchen. Azula began to clean up and pondered Yoshino's strange choice of words. She knew that she cared for Naruto and that he cared for her, but how would learning how to cook help? She was soon pulled from her thoughts when Yoshino and the guest entered the kitchen. Azula looked over the guest and saw that it was Ino Yamanaka, the daughter of Inoichi. She had met Ino before one of her sessions with Inoichi. She only knew of the girl in passing and wondered her reason for being there. Yoshino smiled at Azula. Azula, I'd like you to meet Ino Yamanaka. Nice to meet you, she replied wearily. Ino gave Azula a large smile. It's nice to meet you as well, she replied sweetly. I just came to visit Mrs. Nara and she told me you were staying here. I hoping we could get to know each other and have a girls' day out. I can introduce you to some of Naruto's and my friends. Yoshino smiled at this. I think that's a wonderful idea, she said with exuberance. Azula nodded again, her nervousness building. Yoshino noticed this and turned toward Ino. Would you excuse us for a moment? Ino nodded. Sure thing, she replied as Yoshino and Azula left the kitchen. Yoshino gave Azula a worried look. Are you okay? She asked in a motherly tone. Azula was silent and looked at the floor. Yoshino pulled Azula into a hug. Hey, it's going to be okay, Yoshino said with a smile. She leaned down and looked Azula in the eyes. I want you to be safe, but socializing would be good for you. Ino is a wonderful girl and will take care of you. Azula nodded and gave Yoshino a small smile. Thank you, she whispered. Let's get you ready for a night out on the town, Yoshino said, leading Azula back to her room. SB. Ino and Azula walked through the streets in silence. Ino was excited that she had Azula alone and was planning on milking her for information. First, she wanted to Azula to lower her guard, but that was going to be extremely difficult based on Azula's cautious nature. So far, Azula had been extreme silent as they walked and wondered where they were headed. Ino hadn't said a word since Yoshino's house. She was very nervous on what they were going to do. She had never had a girls' day out. When she spent time with Mai and Tai Li, they spent most of their time at the palace. They never really went out unless it was for big events. Ino turned and looked over Azula, a slight frown on her face. Her clothes were fairly plain and the inner fashion lover in her wouldn't stand for it. Azula, who bought your clothes? She asked in a troubled tone. Naruto, Azula stated as they walked. Oh no. This will not do, Ino exclaimed in a girly tone and grabbed Azula's arm. You need better clothes than these. No self-respecting girl would be caught dead in those in public. Azula looked down at her clothes, oblivious to the problem. She wore a simple red shirt, pants, and a pair of sandals. They looked like the clothes that she had seen most of the villagers wear. I think they're fine, Azula said, confused. She never really picked out her own clothes. Back home, clothing was provided by the royal tailor back home. She mostly wore her war armor when she was out in public. Ino shook her head and sighed. You poor, poor girl, Ino stated, sadly. You are missing out on the wonderful world of clothes and fashion, but do not fear, I will be your guide. Azula didn't have time to answer before when Ino grabbed her arm and started to run like lightning down the streets, dragging Azula behind her. Soon Ino stopped in front of a stop and Azula fell to the ground, dazed from the trip. She slowly stood up and saw a smile on Ino's face. Welcome, Azula, to one of the best places in the village, Ino said in a grand voice. Konoha's beautiful leaves, the best clothing store in the world. Now, let's get you into something that will knock guys' socks off. SB. Naruto, Tsunade, and Shizune had just entered the Land of Iron and were headed toward the Three Wolves Mountain where the Kage meeting was taking place. Naruto was bored and eager to get back to Azula. As they traveled, she was always on his mind. Ever since she entered his life, he couldn't help but want to be near her. At first it was just to help her get better, but as time went on there was more than that. It just felt right when he held her in his arms as they slept together every night. Leaving her alone in the village was one of the hardest things he had done. I hope she is safe, he thought. Hugh listened to her brother's worried thoughts. She will be fine, she said in a caring tone. Yoshino will keep her safe. I know, Naruto replied, but I still can't help but worry. She means a lot to me. Hugh smiled. She knew that Naruto was falling in love with Azula, and she couldn't be happier. She wanted Naruto to be happy and settle down with a wonderful girl. Aside from Azula, no girl had played a big role in Naruto's life. Now, his feelings for Azula were growing and Q began formulating plans to get Azula and Naruto together. Worrying is only natural, Q stated in a sisterly tone. Now let's get going. The sooner we get this over with, the sooner you can get back to Azula. Naruto smiled, picking up speed. Tsunade and Shizune noticed Naruto's increased pace and raced to catch up. They soon saw the Wolves Mountain come into view. Naruto smiled and was about to sprint when his danger sense kicked in. He jumped to the side as a bolt of lightning dropped onto where he was once standing. Tsunade raced toward Naruto. Are you okay? She asked as they looked around for the attacker. Naruto just nodded when suddenly, he detected a laugh. Naruto frowned, he knew that voice very well. He stood up, a serious look on his face. Come on out, Sasuke, Naruto stated coldly. Tsunade angrily looked at Sasuke, but her attention was diverted when she was attacked by a few kunai. She jumped away from Naruto and looked around for her own attacker. Be safe, brat, she thought, as she got ready for her own battle. SB. Ha 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 ha. Sasuke laughed as he walked out into the open. You had to ruin my fun. What fun, Dobe? Naruto replied coldly. Trying to kill me again? Sasuke just shook his head and slowly drew his blade. You should have just let the lightning kill you, he stated. Now, watch as I show you how strong I've become. Sasuke disappeared and reappeared in front of Naruto, attempting impale Naruto with his sword. Naruto twisted away from the sword thrust and punched Sasuke in the face. Sasuke just smiled as he ducked. Naruto jumped away from Sasuke. Missed me, team, he stated as he lifted up his hands up and formed a familiar cross-shaped hand sign. Kagebushin no Jutsu. Smoke filled the area around Naruto, and 10 clones of himself stood beside the original. Sasuke just looked at Naruto and his clones and closed his eyes. He reopened them slowly to reveal the Sharingan. "Bring it, Dobe," he taunted. Naruto needed no invitation before he and his clones charged. While the clones charged, Naruto created 2 more clones to go and gather nature chakra. The clones swarmed Sasuke, who used his sword to destroy clones left and right. The real Naruto charged in with a small blue sphere in his hand. "Rasengan," he cried as he thrust the sphere toward Sasuke's stomach. Sasuke saw this coming and jumped away from the attack, then went through some quick hand signs and lifted 2 fingers to his mouth. "Katun, Gokakyu no Jutsu," he shouted and sent a large fireball toward Naruto. Naruto dodged away from the fireball, quickly unsealed a Fuma Shuriken and threw it at Sasuke. "Really? Dobe," Sasuke stated and blocked the attack with his sword. "I expected more than this." Naruto just smiled. "You should know better than to underestimate me," he reminded, as he created 2 clones. "It will cost you your life." Suddenly the Fuma Shuriken turned into a Naruto clone and kicked Sasuke in the face. Sasuke stumbled back for a second, but it was all the time Naruto needed. 4 clones ran toward Sasuke and kicked him into the air. The real Naruto appeared above Sasuke and used a heel drop on him. Uzumaki Naruto Randan. Sasuke hit the ground and suddenly turned into smoke, revealing a log. "Nice try, Dobe," Sasuke said with a small smile on his face. "But it's not good enough. You cannot beat the Sharingan. Now, it's my turn." Sasuke went through high sign quickly and smiled. "Chidori Iso," he cried and threw a spear of lightning at Naruto. Naruto dove to the side as the spear of lightning flew past him. He glared at Sasuke but smiled when he felt the familiar power of nature chakra fill him. His eyes slowly turned orange with a horizontal bar in the middle. "Well, team," he stated as he stood up. "That was a fun attack, but this ends now." Naruto creates 5 clones and had them charge Sasuke. Sasuke closed his eyes again and activated his Mangekyo Sharingan. "No you don't, Dobe," he stated and charged toward the clones. Naruto just smiled, and with the help of 2 clones, created one of his ultimate weapons. "Risen Shuriken," Naruto stated and threw it toward Sasuke. Sasuke watched that attack come toward him. "Susanoo," he stated and became covered in a skeleton-like chakra armor. The Raisin Shuriken hit Sasuke's Susanoo and expanded. Naruto watched as the ultimate defense faced against his great attack. The air filled with smoke as Naruto waited to see if his attack was effective. Suddenly, a large arrow flew out from the fog and struck Naruto in the shoulder, passing his Sage Mode defenses and sending him flying back, pinning him to a tree. Naruto screamed out in pain as he lost his Sage Mode. The smoke cleared to reveal an unharmed Sasuke. "See, Dobe," he stated as he walked toward the trapped Naruto. "You can't defeat me. Now, be a good little Dobe and let me take the fox." Naruto glared at Sasuke and grabbed the chakra arrow holding him in place. "You will not take Q," he growled as he grunted in pain while pulling the arrow out of his shoulder. "I won't let you." Naruto was suddenly covered in an orange glow as he entered Tail Beast mode, allowing he and Q to work as one. Sasuke watched as Naruto's wound quickly closed and frowned. Naruto stepped from the tree and charged forward at high speed. Naruto gathered a small black ball in his hand. "Cho mini by Jidama," he cried and thrust the attack towards Sasuke. Sasuke quickly activated Susanoo and blocked the attack. The two forces pushed against each other, resulting in a massive explosion, sending both boys flying in opposite directions. Naruto landed on his feet and looked around for Sasuke. "Susanoo!" Sasuke shouted and charged Naruto at full speed. The Susanoo's bow pulled back, ready to fire. Naruto quickly created another Cho mini by Jidama and charged forward. Sasuke fired the arrow and Naruto thrust his Baijidama. The two attacks collided and exploded on impact, destroying everything in a 3-mile radius. Naruto landed on the ground hard and slowly stood up. Sasuke was in the same shape as Naruto and was struggling to stand. "Damn you, Dobe," Sasuke shouted and was about to attack when the sound of others filled the air. Sasuke knew he was out of time. "I will kill you, Dobe. Count on it." Naruto watched as Sasuke disappeared. "Not if I kill you first," Naruto whispered as he sat down on the ground, tired from the battle. Soon he was joined by Killer Bee, Jinchuriki of Gyuki, the 8-tailed beast. "You, 9, you all fine?" he asked as he entered the battlefield ready to fight. Naruto slowly nodded. "Yeah, B," he replied in a tired voice. "That cool fool," B replied, only to be hit in the head by his older brother, A, the Raikage, leader of Kumo. "Stop rapping, you idiot," he stated in an annoyed tone. The enemy could still be in the area. "Sorry bro," B replied. "No, he is gone," Naruto replied in a cold tone. "He left as soon as he felt you guys coming." "Damn coward," I stated in an angered tone, attacking again at the meeting. "What do you mean?" Naruto asked in a worried tone. "All the Kage were ambushed like you were," I stated. "It seemed that the Uchiha wanted to take us out, but we all made it out okay." Naruto nodded, glad that all of the Kages were safe. "So what now?" he asked. "We finish the meeting then head home," A stated, "and prepare to wipe all Uchiha from the face of the earth." Naruto was silent when he heard this, but slowly nodded in agreement. "That's right," he said in a quiet tone. "They need to die so that the world can survive." SB. Sasuke appeared in Madara's secret hideout, the anger evident on his face. "Damn Dobe," he cried, sitting down. Madara and Obito walked over. "It's fine, Sasuke," Obito stated. "We just wanted to keep him distracted while our forces took out their leaders." "But we failed," Sasuke shouted. "They are all still alive." "Yes, but this war is far from over," Madara stated. "We have many ways of striking them." "Like how?" Sasuke demanded. "We strike the ones they love," Obito said simply and walked away, leaving Sasuke to contemplate their words. Sasuke thought for a few moments and smiled. "I will destroy you, Dobe," he stated in a crazed tone. "You won't even have a chance to stop me. I will rip away everything you hold dear, and then, when you're broken and defeated, I will finally destroy you." Aang and his friends walked through Wave Country and were observing the people looking for any signs of Azula's influence. It was a bustling town with many shops and smiling people. They didn't seem to be under the control of an evil fire-throwing princess. Sokka watched with an interested eye at all the different things that were being sold at the vendors and the peacefulness of the town. "This is not what I was expecting," he stated in a slightly disappointed voice. Aang looked at Sokka. "Well, what were you expecting?" he asked in a curious tone. Sokka put a hand to his chin and thought about it for a moment. "Well, I was expecting everyone to be sad or something," he stated, stopping in his tracks. "I was expecting for Azula to be ruling." Zuko looked at Sokka and shook his head. "Azula is good," he stated in a knowing tone. "But she couldn't take over this land that fast." Sokka looked at Zuko, then glanced around. "You never know," he replied in a paranoid tone. She could have spies watching us right now." Everyone just sighed. It kept on walking as Sokka began to glare at the villagers with suspicion. Toph walked in the back of the group as this was going on, using her earth bending to see if anyone was watching them. Some of the villagers had stopped to look at them, but it was only for a moment, just normal curiosity when someone new comes into town. What she did notice was that Ty Lee and Mai stood to the side a little away from the gang. They were following the group, but they could also slip away and do their own thing. She watched as they slowed down and turned into an alley, leaving the group. What are they up to? Toph thought and was about to voice the disappearance of Azula's former friends, but something kept her silent. The words of the foxes coming to her mind. Maybe if she went with Mai and Ty Lee she would get her answers. Toph used some earth bending to create a hole in the ground and disappeared into it, following Mai and Ty Lee as they went their own way. With Mai and Ty Lee. Ty Lee and Mai walked quickly through the village, wanting to put some distance between them and the Avatar's group. They wanted to find Azula on their own and see if they could convince her to come quietly with them home. Mai was against the plan at first, but after much begging from Ty Lee she relented. Secretly she wanted to find Azula first as well. She wanted to see how her former friend was doing. Ty Lee, she stated as they walked, and appeared onto another main road. Let's ask one of the villagers for help. They might know of a bigger city we can go to and find more information about Azula. Ty Lee smiled at this and did a quick cartwheel. That's a great idea, Mai, she stated in a happy voice, and looked around for someone to ask. She spotted an old man wearing a black shirt, black pants, white scarf, with glasses walking by. "Hello, sir," Ty Lee called out and skipped over to the old man who stopped at the sound of her voice. He looked at Ty Lee with a warm smile. "What can I do for you today, little lady?" he stated in a grandfatherly tone. My friend and I are new here," Ty Lee stated in a happy tone. "And we are looking for our lost friend, but don't know where to look. Do you know of a large city or place we can go to see if we can get more information on our friend?" The old man thought for a moment. "There is always Konoha," he stated as a small smile spread across his face. "That is probably the best place to start. You can hire shinobi to help you find your friend." Ty Lee nodded, a bit confused at some of the words the man had said. How do we get there?" she asked. "Actually, I will be heading to Konoha soon on business," he replied as he wiped his face with his scarf. "You can come with me and my grandson. My name is Tazuna. Nice to meet you. I am Ty Lee, and that is my friend Mai." Ty Lee replied and grabbed Tazuna's hand. "Thank you for the help." Tazuna just smiled. "It not a problem, little lady," he replied and started to walk. let's head to my home and we will head to Konoha from there. Ty Lee nodded and was about to follow Tazuna when someone grabbed her wrist. Ty Lee, said Mai in a cold tone. Can I talk with you for a moment? She turned to Tazuna. We will be with you in a few moments, she stated, and Tazuna nodded. Ty Lee nodded. What is it, Mai? She asked in a confused tone. Should we trust this man? Mai asked in a quiet voice. He might be leading us into a trap. Ty Lee smiled. He's fine, she replied with a smile. His aura is quite nice, and is someone you can trust. I have to agree with Ty Lee, a voice said from behind the pair, making them jump. They both quickly turned and saw Toph standing before them. I couldn't feel a light come from him at all. Mai glared at Toph. What are you doing here? She asked in a defensive tone. Well, I was wondering why you two left the group, Toph stated in a knowing tone. We just want to find Azula, Ty Lee stated quickly. We want to make sure she is safe before the Avatar locks her away again. Toph was silent. Well, I am going with you to make sure you are not trying to do something to hurt my friends, she stated, and stood her ground. Or I will call everyone here. Fine, come, Mai stated in a cold tone. Just don't attack Azula on sight. I make no promises, Toph stated, and they all walked toward Tazuna. SB. Azula stood next to Ino as they walked through the village. They had just left the clothing store and she was dressed in an entirely new outfit. She wore a red shirt that hugged her form, a pair of tight jeans, sandals, and Naruto's crystal. It had taken over 2 hours for Ino to be happy with the new look. Ino had also gotten her some other clothes as well as dresses for all occasions. You can never have too many clothes, Ino told Azula as they walked toward a restaurant after their long shopping spree. If you say so, Azula replied in a slightly annoyed tone. She didn't like being used as a dress-up doll, but she did have fun. Not that she would admit that. So where are we headed now? We are going to the Dango stand to meet with the rest of the girls, Ino stated with a knowing tone. She had planned this beforehand and couldn't wait to get all the juicy information on her and Naruto, also to see if she had a chance to steal Naruto from her. Azula was nervous about meeting other girls. She knew that they were all friends with Naruto, or at least knew him. She wondered if they would accept her or would they shun her like the girls in school, except Ty Lee and Mai. They arrived at the restaurant and walked toward a crowded table. There was 3 girls sitting at the table they were headed toward. The first had pink hair, green eyes, and a bored look. The second was a girl with brown hair, up in 2 buns, and a large scroll at her side. The final one was a girl with long blue hair, purple eyes, and a shy look on her face. Ino waved at them. Hello, she stated in a happy tone. I brought a new friend. This is Azula. Hello, the 3 girls said at once. Azula just nodded. Hello, she replied as she took her seat next to Ino and the panda hair girl. Ino chatted animatedly with the other girls while Azula sat in silence. She didn't know what to say or what to do. These people were entirely new to her and could potentially be harmful. Azula, the panda girl said in a warm tone. My name is Ten. It's nice to meet you. Azula looked at Ten. Nice to meet you, she replied quickly and turned to look at the menu. Ten could feel Azula's nervousness and wanted to get her to relax. Let me introduce you to everyone else, she stated in a calm tone. The girl with the pink hair is Sakura. She is Naruto's teammate, the other girl in Hinata Hyuga. Azula just nodded as she learned the names of everyone there. Thank you for informing me, Azula stated quickly. Tenten just smiled, watching as Azula relaxed just a bit. So Azula, where are you from? She asked, making Azula freeze for a moment. I come from a kingdom far away, Azula answered quickly. She was told by Naruto and everyone else not to mention anything about the Fire Nation or it will cause problems that would be very troublesome to deal with. Tenten just nodded, that's interesting, as she took a sip of her drink. Do they have any interesting weapons? Just swords and spears mostly, Azula stated in a calm tone. Tenten just nodded, a little sad she couldn't learn about new different types of weapons. Soon the waiter came over and they all ordered their food. The food soon came and everyone ate, small conversations going on between the friends. Hinata had spent most of the time glancing over at Azula, much to Azula's annoyance. Azula finally had enough. Why are you staring at me? She asked in an annoyed tone. Hinata seemed to shrink into her jacket. Well, she stuttered trying to form her words. I was wondering how. Do you come to live with Naruto? Everyone went silent. Azula looked at Hinata for a few moments, slight steam starting to come off her body. That is none of your concern, she stated in a very angered tone, talking through her teeth. Hinata seemed to flinch at this at first. I want to know, she stated in a more demanding tone. I want to see why you are with Naruto-kun. Azula began to get even hotter. Why I am with Naruto is none of your concern, Azula stated as she slowly stood up, glaring at Hinata. Now leave me be. Suddenly the table caught fire, much to everyone's surprise. Azula quickly ran out of the restaurant and headed back to the Nara's home. Suddenly a familiar voice filled Azula's mind. Such a disgrace, Ozai's voice stated in a disgusted voice. You should have burned the stuttering girl to a crisp. Where is your fire? Azula ignored Ozai and kept walking. She just pictured her special place and soon Ozai's voice was all but a whisper. Azula, a voice suddenly said from behind her. Azula turned and saw Hinata standing there, her fingers touching in a nervous tick. What is it? She replied in an angered tone. Ozai's voice slowly starting to creep back up in her mind. I am sorry if I angered you, Hinata stated in an embarrassed tone. I wasn't looking to upset you. Azula just nodded, not wanting to hear anything for anyone. Tell her she is a worthless girl. What she can do, make her burn. Ozai's voice shouted at her, making Azula flinch. Just leave me alone, Azula demanded and started to walk away, but Hinata grabbed her wrist. Wait, she stated in a worried tone. I want to clear the air. Azula stopped, ignoring the shouts of Ozai's voice in her head. Fine, clear the air, Azula stated as she held a hand to her head in pain as Ozai got louder and louder. I just wanted to make sure Naruto was okay, Hinata said as she looked at Azula with a concerned expression. I have always been worried that Naruto is happy. Azula looked at Hinata with confusion. Why are you worried about Naruto? She asked in a heated voice. Hinata looked away. She stammered much to Azula's annoyance. Just shut this girl up and be done with it, her father voice demanded, and for once Azula agreed with him, not that she was happy they agreed. Enough of this, Azula stated and turned away, her anger building. She didn't understand why Hinata's questions were making her angry. She ignored Hinata as she tried to continue the conversation and headed back toward the Nara compound. She walked into the Nara home, her angered steps could be heard all around. Yoshino heard this and came out of the living room to see what was going on. She watched as Azula walked toward her and the anger that rolled of her. She wondered what had caused her to become so angry. It was a change from her usual sad/scared countenances that she had since she arrived in the village. Yoshino walked over to Azula and put a hand on her shoulder, making Azula stop. Azula turned and looked at Yoshino, anger in her eyes, but that anger softened. Yoshino smiled at Azula and led her to the back porch. They both took a seat on the edge looking out into the yard. Azula dear, Yoshino stated in a loving tone, as she watched the girl before her, what is wrong? Azula was silent. There is nothing wrong, she replied as she tried not to look at Yoshino. Yoshino just smiled. Her son Shikamaru did this to her all the time, but she was always able to get out what was bothering him with a good talk and maybe a threat or two. With Azula she knew that as they talked she would learn what was the matter. I know that something is bothering you, she said in a motherly tone as she put an arm around Azula, who went a bit stiff at the gesture but that slowly faded away. I am here for you Azula, so you can tell me anything. Azula thought about Yoshino's words. She heard Ursa's voice telling her that Yoshino was lying, but she ignored it. She knew that Yoshino cared for her, after all that she had done for her over the last 2 weeks that Naruto had been away. She knew she could trust Yoshino. At the restaurant one of the girls kept asking me what I was doing with Naruto, she stated, the anger still evident in her voice. I didn't like the questions. Why does she have to know about why I am living with Naruto? It is none of her business, yet she kept on pressing it. I got so angry and came home. Yoshino nodded, taking in all the information, planning on asking Ino more about what happened there at a later date. So you didn't like the questions and got angry, she said simply, and Azula just nodded. That is okay. Everyone gets angry at things that bother them or make them uncomfortable, so that is fine. Yoshino's reaction to her anger surprised Azula greatly. She didn't get angry with her for being angry or use that anger to hurt others. So she didn't know how to respond to her. She just looked at her with slight awe, not much if could be seen on her face though. She tried to figure out the best way to respond, but nothing came to mind. Yoshino stood up and motioned for Azula to follow her. I think we should go and do some training, she said in a sure tone, even more confusion appearing on Azula's face. Yoshino noticed this and chuckled to herself. When I am mad and want to get rid of those feelings, I like to train. So that's what we are going to do. Now go change and meet me out here when you're done. Azula nodded and headed into the house. What Yoshino stated about training did make sense. It was a good way to release energy and feelings. That was one reason she trained so much before. Also, she had to be the best so no one could touch her. She entered her room and changed when a voice she had not heard before came into her mind. You are regaining your fire, it said in a deep, booming tone. Azula listened and focused on the voice. She closed her eyes and found herself standing in the Hall of Fire Lords. This surprised her a bit due to the fact she had not been alone in her mind for the past several months. Please meet me out here, the voice said through the hall, and Azula slowly approached the main doorway. She rested her hand against the door, a slight hesitation as she thought of who was out there. Yet she felt as if she need to go and face the voice. So she took a breath and opened the door. She walked out and came face to face with the blue dragon, its eyes peering into hers with calm intent. "Welcome, young one," the dragon said. Azula looked at the dragon. "Who are you?" she asked, a slight commandish tone to her voice as she looked up at the dragon. The dragon chuckled for a few moments. "You will find out when you are ready, my dear child," he replied in a sage-like tone. He leaned in closer till his eye was directly in Azula's face. "I am here to give you back a small piece of your fire." Before Azula could say anything, the dragon had moved away from her and opened its mouth, breath a large breath of blue fire at her. Azula was consumed in the fire and soon found herself back in the waking world, laying on her bed. She slowly sat up, a bit dazed from the small adventure in her mind. She heard Yoshino call her and she went outside, the talk with the dragon still on her mind. As she reached Yoshino, she saw that she had changed from her usual outfit to one that was suited more for training. "Are you okay?" Yoshino asked her in a slightly worried tone. "You took a bit longer than I expected." Azula just nodded. "I am all right," she replied in a calm tone. Yoshino looked at Azula for a few moments, trying to detect anything amiss, but found nothing, much to Azula's relief. "Okay. Now shall we begin?" Yoshino led Azula through a series of different exercises and other things. She even showed Azula how to throw a kunai. Using weapons was something foreign to Azula, since before all she did was fight with fire bending, so it took a bit to get her throws on target. As they moved on to the next part of the training, Azula vowed to become proficient at kunai throwing as soon as she possibly could. Yoshino walked back to the house and sat on the porch. She let out a small tired sigh. "I haven't trained like that in years," she said in a tired tone as she rested. "I need to get back into shinobi state." Azula had joined Yoshino and nodded. "So you were a shinobi before?" she asked. She had learned about the shinobi after talking with Naruto about it before. She liked the system a lot and was very interested in all the abilities they had. She could see how if they had shinobi were much more adaptable than most of the people back home. Yoshino nodded. "Back before I was married," she said in a nostalgic tone. "I only made it to Chunin level, but I was still pretty good. I was known for my skills in taijutsu, one of the few Naras who could do it very well." Azula just nodded. "Can you show me some of your taijutsu?" she asked, a hint of excitement in her voice. Yoshino looked at the younger girl, before her a smirk appearing on her face. "Shall we have a small spar?" she asked. Azula thought for a moment and slowly nodded. "I would like to, but all I have is my fire bending stances, and I can't fire bend." "So they are useless," she stated in a frustrated tone. Yoshino nodded, noting the frustration on Azula's face. She placed her hand on Azula's shoulder. "How about you show me some of those stances?" she said in a caring tone, standing up. "We can see what training you have and work from there to help you learn something new." Azula was silent as she processed the information. Learning a new way of fighting would be hard for her, but it would give her something to focus on. She knew that without her fire bending she was useless, and she didn't want to be useless because in her experience people always throw away useless things. "I would like that," she replied in a calm tone as she set her resolve. She would not be useless. A small smile spread across her face as she prepared to move forward. She could hear in the back of her mind the voices of her parents, but they couldn't touch her. SB. It had been over a month since Naruto had left the village and Azula was on her own once again. She had started her training with Yoshino, and she had been slowly getting back into fighting shape. Yoshino had looked over her stances and stated that they were perfect for adapting to close combat. She had taken her to see a funny-looking man named Guy, who looked over her stances as well and agreed with Yoshino's assessment. He did say she needed to gain some more muscle to have power behind her strikes. So they created a training regiment to help her gain muscle as well as get used to fighting hand to hand. She enjoyed the training and it helped to block out the voices of her parents even more. She had spent the last few weeks without their torment in her mind. She was happy to be free of their cries for the time being, yet she knew she would have to get rid of them completely at some point. She let the thought drop as she entered the home of Inoichi. They had made progress in her mind and more of the broken pieces had reformed, bring much of the landscape back into place. What was once a broken set of floating lands were forming a beautiful island and castle. There were still areas that had yet to reform, such as the courtyard where she fought Zuko and the mountain behind the palace. She knew that she had to enter those places to fully be healed, but as she was now, she was not ready to face all of those things yet. She let out a small sigh as she assessed herself, knowing there was much work for her to do. She was pulled out of her thoughts as Inoichi came over to her and gave her a hug. Since the time of the dragons, he had taken it upon himself to act like a loving father to her. It had surprised her at first, but she quickly came to enjoy the time they spent together. He even showed her a bit on how to arrange flowers. "How are you feeling?" he asked as he broke the hug and looked at her with a comforting smile. Azula just let a small smile grace her face. "I have been doing well. Yoshino has been helping me train. It has been wonderful," she replied as she looked up at Inoichi. Inoichi nodded, a smile on his face. That is good," he replied as they moved through the house toward his office. "I am glad you are enjoying training." Azula nodded in agreement as they entered the office. Inoichi watched as Azula lay on the couch and closed her eyes. He quickly preformed his jutsu and found himself standing next to Azula in the Hall of Fire Lords. Azula led him out and into the palace. They walked past the pond and down a hallway lined with pillars. They stopped at an area where there was no ground. This was where the gate to the rest of the palace would be. Inoichi looked at the floating lands in the area and then to Azula. They had made much progress on her mind, and much of her personality and traits were beginning to come out once again. Since this was occurring, he knew they were coming to the hardest part of her healing. "Azula," he said in a calm tone as he looked down at her. "I want to ask you about your relationship with your mother." Azula was silent, not wanting to talk about that, a small fear that she would appear to try and torment her. "All right," she said as she steeled her resolve, casting away her fear. "My mother and I never seemed to get along. When I was little, she seemed more concerned with my older brother Zuko." The world around them changed as Azula's memories started to play. They watched as Ursa would spend more time with Zuko and leave Azula alone with her father. Sometimes they would spend time together, but Ursa would always seem to be worried about the way Azula acted. The memories played until Ursa was banished, and they soon found themselves back at the edge. "She seemed to always have love for Zuko and I was only a monster," she stated in an angered yet sad tone. "It got to the point where I actually agreed with her." Inoichi watched as another memory played before them. It was Azula, Zuko, Mai, and Ty Lee at a beach surrounding a campfire. They each shared something, and Inoichi saw as Azula talked about Ursa and agree with her, but Azula said it still hurt. She never really seemed to love me. Inoichi nodded, placing an arm around Azula's shoulder. I do not know her reasons behind why she was the way she was, he stated in a comforting tone. But one thing I do know is that you are not a monster. Azula looked at him. Are you sure? She asked in a low tone. More memories of her past appeared. The taking of Ba Sing Se, the hunting of the Avatar, capturing the Kyoshi warriors, and other things played for Inoichi to watch. Azula looked at him. I did all these things, I enjoyed the suffering of others, I controlled others. If you did not do as I say, I got rid of you. Does that not make me a monster? Inoichi was about to answer when Ursa's voice rang about. That makes you a monster, she said in a sad tone as she appeared before the pair. Only a monster does those things. Azula just stared at her mother with anger and hatred. You did nothing to stop it, she shouted at Ursa, her right arm thrown to the side to emphasize her statement. Ursa just looked at Azula with confusion on her face. What could I have done to stop it? You seem to enjoy being that way, she replied in a matter-of-fact tone. Ever since you were a child you were that way. Azula began to shake. That was the only way I could receive attention from you or father, she replied through her teeth, her eyes bearing into Ursa. You only loved Zuko. You never cared for me at all. Azula was about to head towards Ursa when she felt a hand on her shoulder. She saw Inoichi give her a calm smile. He turned to Ursa. She is not a monster, he stated in an authoritative tone. A monster indicates someone who cares for no one, who hurts all those around them. From what I can see, Azula is not a monster. She did cruel things, but she cared for others, the few that she had. Your opinion does not matter, Ursa stated as she started to walk towards them, slowly drawing a knife. She is and will forever be a monster. Azula was shaking as she listened to the conversation. She had listened to Inoichi's words and saw the truth in them, yet her mother's words still clung to her. She looked down and saw Naruto's crystal, remembering the times they had been together and how she had come to care for him. Azula looked up at Ursa, fire slowly building in her eyes. You say I am a monster, she said to Ursa in a heated tone, slowly taking an attack stance. Well, your opinion no longer matters. Azula shot her fist forward and a large ball of red fire shot from her fist, surprising Ursa, who barely had time to dodge out of the way. Azula didn't stop there, she sent another large blast of fire at Ursa. Ursa moved out of the way, an angered look on her face as she faded away. Azula panted as she stopped her attacks. She turned towards Inoichi, a small smile on her face. I am not a monster, she said in a quiet tone. Inoichi smiled as well. That's right, he replied as they walked back toward the Hall of Fire Lords, his arm around her shoulders in a parental manner. Naruto jumped quickly from tree to tree. The meeting of the Kages had ended 3 days prior, and they were headed back home. He had wanted to travel at a quicker pace to get back to Konoha, but Tsunade had taken a day to talk with Gaara. Naruto was happy to see Gaara, but he wanted to get back to Azula. She had occupied a lot of his thoughts over the past 2 months since he had left the village. Azula was someone he had grown to care for. She had gone through a lot in her life, and it had left a deep scar on her. Naruto had seen the scar heal and peace replace fear. Her once sad face had been turning into one of happiness. Just being around her made Naruto never want to see her sad again. He was pulled out of his thoughts as the gates of Konoha came into view and a smile began to come across Naruto's face. He was about to pick up the pace even more when he heard Tsunade call his name. He turned and saw her motion for him to stop. Naruto nodded in agreement, a little miffed at having to stop. He hopped down onto the main road and waited for Tsunade to join him. Tsunade landed next to him, a large smile on her face. "Now Naruto," she stated in calm tone. "No ramen before seeing Azula, okay?" Naruto just smiled. "Then I have to take Azula with me to get ramen then," he replied. "Can I go now?" Tsunade nodded and Naruto shot off into the trees. She let a smile grace her face. She couldn't believe how much he had come to care for this girl, and he had only known her for the past 5 months. With Naruto. Naruto quickly made his way into the village, only stopping for a quick moment to say hi to the gate guards. He ran quickly over the rooftops, his destination soon coming into view. He hopped down from the rooftops and landed in front of the Nara compound. He took a few breaths before he knocked on the door, his excitement clearly evident on his face. He heard the sounds of footsteps and the door slid open, revealing an tired Shikamaru. He looked at Naruto with annoyance. "What is it, Naruto?" he asked with a yawn. Naruto gave Shikamaru a large smile. "Is Azula here?" Shikamaru shook his head. "She is out with Mom." Naruto nodded. "Thanks, Shiki." He jumped away and headed into the village. Shikamaru just sighed and closed the door, ready to go back to his nap. Naruto ran quickly and was soon in the village's main shopping area. He looked around for any sign of Azula or Yoshino, but found nothing. He frowned slightly but continued his search. He created a few shadow clones and had them go to different parts of the village to see if they could find the pair. He ran all about until he felt one of his clones disappear. He smiled as the information came into his mind. He turned quickly and ran towards Training Ground 7. With Azula. Azula dodged another punch as she sparred with Rock Lee. She turned quickly and kicked at his side. He blocked the kick with his arm and threw another punch at Azula's chest. She redirected the punch to the side and got in close, brought her hand into her chest, and struck Rock Lee with her elbow. He stepped back a few paces and smiled. "What a youthful hit," he stated happily, bringing his hands back up into his basic stance. Azula just smiled and charged forward. She brought her right leg up and kicked towards Lee's head. He blocked the attack and sent a punch at Azula's shoulder. His attack hit, knocking her a bit off balance. He pressed his advantage and struck with a lightning-fast kick, knocking Azula to the ground. Azula got up quickly, her eyes filled with resolve. "I will not lose," she told herself, and she charged in once again. She engaged Lee and they continued to fight, each blocking and countering as best as they could. While this was going on, Yoshino and Guy watched from the side, evaluating the two fighters. "She has gotten used to being up close," Yoshino stated as she watched Azula sent a low kick at Lee, who blocked and countered with his own kick. Guy just nodded. "She has," he replied, as he crossed his arms under his chest. He then noticed a shadow out of the corner of his eyes, which then disappeared into smoke. A smile spread across his face. He walked toward the sparring pair and held up his hand. "That is enough," he called, stopping Azula and Lee. The pair looked at Guy for a moment but stopped fighting. Azula gave him a look of confusion. "Why did you stop the spar?" she asked, slightly annoyed. "Our time is not up yet." Guy just gave her a smile. "We have a visitor," he said, and suddenly someone appeared. Azula's eyes widened as she saw Naruto stand up and give her a happy look. "Hi, Azula," he said with a large smile. Azula's body acted on its own and she rushed over to Naruto, wrapping her arms around him, and rested her head on his chest. She didn't know why she did this, but it felt right. She felt him wrap his arms around her and held her tightly. "I've missed you," he said, resting his head on top of hers. "I've missed you as well," she replied with joy. He was back, he had kept his promise to her. "That is so cute," they heard someone say, and turned to see Yoshino, Guy, and had a camera in her hands, a large smile on her face. Naruto and Azula quickly broke apart, Naruto having a large blush on his face, while Azula had a look of anger and annoyance on her face from the sudden break of contact. Guy walked over to Naruto and slapped him on the back. "Welcome home, Naruto." Yoshino just walked over to Naruto as well, a warm smile on her face. "Welcome back," she said as well, sliding her camera back into her pocket. Naruto just smiled. "It is great to be back," his eyes rested on Azula. Yoshino followed Naruto's vision and giggled. "I bet you are," a knowing smile on her face. "Now let's go back to the house. I bet you and Azula want to catch up." Naruto smiled. "That sounds great." He turned to Azula and held out his hand. "Shall we go?" Azula just smiled, her hand sliding into his, and stood beside him. She couldn't explain the feelings she was having, but she knew that it was something that she wanted to have. Naruto and Azula left the Nara compound after several hours of catching up. He had told them all about the meeting as well as the attack by Sasuke. When Azula heard about the attack, she nearly set her chair on fire. She vowed if she met Sasuke she would make him burn. Now they were on their way back to their home. Naruto held Azula's things in a bag. They walked through the village at a level pace, both happy to be in each other's presence once again. Naruto looked at Azula and couldn't help but be happy with all the changes that had occurred while he was gone. When he left, she was still very dependent on him, yet now she stood tall on her own. She was once scared and now she was strong. "Naruto," he heard Azula say, a calm look on her face. "Yes, Azula," he replied. "I am glad you're back," she said in a whisper, leaning against him as they walked. Naruto smiled. "I am glad to be back," he replied. Their home soon came into view, a sigh of happiness escaping from Naruto's lips. They entered and took a seat on the couch. Azula brought her legs up and rested against Naruto's side, her eyes slowly being overtaken by sleep. Soon she was asleep and Naruto just wrapped his arm around her sleeping form. He soon joined her, letting the rest of the day go by. A few days later. 4 days had passed since Naruto had returned. It had taken them a few days for the pair to readjust to living with each other, but some things did not change. Their second night that Naruto was home, Azula had joined her in his bed. Even though she was able to silence the voices by herself, she said she felt the safest when she was near him. Now they were in their backyard, enjoying the day. Naruto simply smiled as he watched Azula going through her stances. Her strikes had determination behind them, and he could swear he saw some slight fire coming from her fist. She looked at peace as she trained, and Naruto couldn't help but admire her natural beauty. She finished going through her last stance and turned to look at Naruto, a large smile on her face. "Shall we spar?" she asked excitedly. Naruto just stood, cracking his neck as he got ready. "I am down," he stated as he took his stance. "Bring it." Azula nodded and charged forward. She threw a quick punch at his face. Naruto blocked it in counter with his own punch. She redirected the punch and struck his chest with her fist. Naruto didn't show any pain from the hit and brought his foot up and kicked at her side. Azula blocked the attack, but it made her slide away from him by the sheer force of the kick. Her arm was slightly numbed from the attack, but that made her more determined. She didn't have time to think when she saw Naruto in front of her throwing a large haymaker at her. She ducked under the punch and got in close, using her palm to push Naruto away. He slid back a few feet and smiled. She just smiled. "It seems that you are weaker than I thought," she stated with superiority. "I expected more from you." Naruto continued to smile. "I am just getting warmed up," he replied as he settled into his stance. Azula tilted her head to the side, a wicked look on her face. "Then show me," she shouted and charged forward. With Mei, Ty Lee and Toph. The trio sat in a wagon with Tazuna. It had been about 5 days since they left Wave Country to go to Konoha. Ty Lee had spent most of the trip talking with Tazuna and learning about his family. Mei had spent the time looking over her weapons and things, and Toph just relaxed in the wagon. Toph let out a yawn. As the wagon moved, she wished that Aang and the others were there. She could picture Sokka freaking out by their disappearance and being more paranoid around the people of this world. She was pulled out of her thoughts when the wagon came to a halt. "We here," she heard Tazuna called and felt as everyone exited the wagon. She soon joined them. As soon as her feet touched the ground, she looked around at the surrounding area. She saw that they were in a large forested area, a large wall in front of them. She let out a whistle. "Man, that is big," she stated. She felt as Mei and Ty Lee nodded. Tazuna just laughed. "Yeah, most people are always amazed by the wall of Konoha," he said calmly. "Now come on, let's get checked in." They nodded and soon were in a line to enter the village, many different vendors and merchants about. Toph just kept tapping her foot, watching for any hidden attackers. To her surprise, she felt as people came and went through the trees at amazing speeds. The guards seemed to take little heed of the people in the trees, most likely due to the fact they were allies. After about an hour of waiting, they were at the head of the line. The guards had Tazuna, Mei, and Ty Lee sign their names down. When they found out Toph was blind, they put some ink on her finger and had her push it against the paper. She wondered why they did that but thought little of it afterwards. They walked through the gates and found themselves in the village. Toph couldn't help but be in awe at the sheer size of the village. It was bigger than Ba Sing Se. Mei and Ty Lee were also in awe, and Ty Lee could not contain her excitement. "This place is amazing," she stated as she walked with the group. "It's so big." Tazuna just chuckled. "It is pretty big," he replied. "Konoha is the biggest of all the hidden villages." Mei looked at Tazuna with slight confusion. "Hidden villages?" The hidden villages are the home of the shinobi, ninja that protect the land. Ty Lee stated as they walked. Isn't that right, Tazuna? He nodded, that's right. May just nodded. So where do we go now to find out information about our friend, she asked. You go the Hokage Tower, which is the center of the village, and hire some shinobi to help you find your friend. Doesn't that cost money? Toph stated in a knowing tone. Money that we don't have. Ty Lee frowned slightly, but that didn't deter her. It will work out, she said happily, we just have to talk with them and see what we can do. Tazuna nodded, that the spirit. Shall we be off to the tower? Everyone nodded and they followed after Tazuna. A while later. They had gone to the tower, but due to the current times no new missions were being taken. Tazuna was nice enough to give them some money to use for the next couple of days. So now they were sitting in a park trying to figure out what to do. May sat with her arm resting on the bench armrest, her chin resting in hand. Ty Lee sat with her legs crossed Indian style, playing with her braid, and Toph just tapped her feet on the ground tried. This was a bust, Toph stated in annoyance as she watched the people around her. Ty Lee shook her head, it's okay, she exclaimed as she flips forward to her feet. We will think of something. May just shook her head and stood up, let's just find a place to stay for the night and continue our search later. Ty Lee and Toph nodded and started to follow May toward the hotel district at a leisurely pace. Toph continued to watch all those around them, as she thought about leaving her friends. They are probably freaking out right now, wondering where we went. With the gang. Sokka ran around Wave Country like a madman, Toph, Ty Lee, Mei, and where are you? He shouted as people looked at him with shock. Katara ran over to her brother and slapped him on the back of the head. Stop making a scene, she shouted at him and looked at the crowd, a sorry smile on her face. She grabbed his arm and dragged him away from the crowd, quickly. What are you doing? She demanded as she dropped him on the ground in a heap. Sokka looked up at his sister. I was looking for the others, he replied as he sat up. They just disappeared on us. What if they were taken by Azula's forces? They could be in danger. That may be true, but you running around screaming their names are not going to help. Katara countered and watched as Sokka deflated even more. Then how do you propose we find them? Sokka demanded. I have the answer to that, said Aang as he stood in front of them, with a young man their age wearing a hat. Sokka jumped up, great, and who's the kid? The young man looked at Sokka with contempt. I'm not a kid, he stated with confidence. I am Inari. Well, Inari, Sokka stated as he walked over to him acting all tough. Where are our friends? Inari just smiled, they went with my grandfather to Konoha. Sokka just looked confused, where the heck in Konoha? Back with Toph. Toph just shook her head as she imagined how Sokka would be going crazy, when she suddenly felt a familiar presence walk by. She tapped her foot once again, but the familiar presence was gone. Toph just shook her head. Was that Azula? A few days later. The trio walked around the village, going from store to store, gathering supplies for the trip and finding Azula. Tazuna had given them more than enough money to gather more supplies as well as pay for their room. They planned to try one of the other major villages to see if they could get any leads on Azula. Ty Lee walked on her hands as they traveled through the village, which usually back home got some attention, but here it seemed as the villagers didn't care. May had a bag with all the supplies as well as some of the thrown weapons of the village. She was surprised by the level of craftsmanship and balance they had and nearly spent 2 hours talking one of the store's employees that had her hair up in 2 buns. Toph just let out a yawn and ate a piece of bread that tasted like melon. She had to admit the food in this world was really good. She had a tired yawn escape her lips as she sent another seeing wave out. As she looked at all the people around her, nearly dropped her bread in shock. On the other side of the village stood Azula. She stood tall and seemed to be not crazy, which threw Toph for a loop. She watched as a boy walked over to her and they started to head toward the other end of the street. May, she stated, getting the girl's attention. Azula is here. May looked at Toph with surprise. Are you sure? Toph nodded. My feet don't lie, she stated simply and started down the street. I am keeping track of her and her new friend. Ty Lee jumped in excitement and grabbed Toph's hand. Let's go see her, she cried and started to pull her along, only to feel May's hand on her shoulder. We got to approach this with a plan, she stated, making Ty Lee deflate a bit. She turned to Toph, who nodded. Can you keep track of them? That not a problem. Toph stated as she started walking. Now make a plan, because mine is to trap her in rocks. May just nodded. Just follow my lead, she replied in a quiet tone, as they followed after Toph. We can hopefully get Azula to come with us without any fighting. Toph just snorted. This is Azula we're talking about. It is always a fight with her. Naruto and Azula had just started up the path to their home. Azula had just had her latest session with Inoichi and progress was slow. Azula still was having trouble with facing her father, and a bit with her mother, but it was slowly getting better. Yet she still had a ways to go before she could fully be healed and at peace in her mind. She was pulled out of her thoughts when she felt Naruto squeeze her hand gently. You okay? He asked with concern. Azula just nodded. I am fine, she stated as she moved closer to him. Just tired from the session. Naruto nodded. What did you talk about? He asked as they walked, happy to have Azula so close. We talked about my mother, she stated in a slight angered tone. We talked about how she treated me and how it made me feel. Azula just felt his arm wrap around her. That is in the past, he stated with understanding. She won't hurt you ever again with me around, that a promise. Azula looked at him and let a small smile graced her face. Thank you. They walked toward the house when they noticed a trio of people standing in front of them. Naruto looked at them and couldn't recognize who they were. He had never seen them around the village and wondered how they found the house. He let a hidden kunai drop into his hand as he watched the trio. He felt Azula freeze as she stared at the people before her. She began to shake and hold her head. No, she stated as she stared at them. You can't be here. Azula, the one with black hair, stated in a monotone voice. Naruto quickly stood in front of Azula, the kunai raised in front of him. Who are you? He demanded as he began to gather chakra. What you want with Azula? I am May, the girl said simply and pointed towards the other girls. This is Ty Lee and Toph. We are from Azula's world. We have come to take her home. Azula glared at them. You are here to lock me away again, aren't you? She shouted at them, her anger growing. We are here to help you, Ty Lee stated in a caring tone. Azula's anger grew as she heard these words, the memories of their betrayal coming to the forefront of her mind. You are here to hurt me, like all the others, she retorted, the rage showing on her face. You never cared for me. Ty Lee looked like she had been struck. That is not true, she replied with conviction. We are your friends. Azula began to laugh, but quickly stopped. Then why did you betray me? May looked at Azula. You know why, she said simply, but we still are your friends. You are no friends of mine. Azula shouted, grabbed the kunai in Naruto's hand and charged the group. Ty Lee and May were surprised by the sudden charge, but a wall of earth blocked her way. Toph stamped her foot down and sent the wall of earth flying at Azula. She was then surprised to feel it gets destroyed by the boy. He stood in front of Azula protectively, who just pushed past him and continued her charge at May and Ty Lee. Toph went to block her way again when the boy appeared in front of her. Toph was slightly surprised by his speed but quickly sent him flying away from him. He reset himself and landed on the ground lightly, which made Toph raise her eyebrow. She had only met one person that could and that lightly, and that was Aang. She quickly shifted her feet and sent rocks flying at him in quick succession. He dodged the rocks with ease and sent a few knives flying at her. Toph just smirked and blocked the attack with a rock. If that all you got, then this will be easy, Toph taunted as she launched more rocks at him. He kept dodging, but she waited until his foot touched the ground and surrounded him with walls of earth. She cut off his escapes and hit him square in the chest with a large rock. He flew back and through the wall, not moving. She smiled and turned to face off with Azula when she heard a popping sound and felt the boy's body disappear. That a crazy strong jutsu, she heard from beside her and felt with her feet that he was right next to him. Where you learn that? Toph just twisted her foot and sent him flying away from her, followed by several more blasts of rocks. He dodged the rocks and landed on the ground, his feet spread, and he shot forward at amazing speeds. He jumped in the air and Toph lost sight of him. When he landed there was 3 of him, which threw her off a bit. She quickly went of the offensive and threw rocks at 3 attacking boys, talking out 2 who went up in smoke, but she had to dodge the last attack from the remaining one. She rolled and got to her feet, glaring at the boy. What the heck was that, she stated. Naruto just smiled at him as he formed the seals and was covered the air in smoke. Toph wasn't fazed by the smoke but was shocked when suddenly 10 copies of the boy appeared around him. This might be harder than I thought, she told herself as she started her next attack. With Azula. While Toph and Naruto were fighting, Azula had continued her attack on May and Ty Lee. She dodged several of the May's knives and was able to counter a Ty Lee's chi attack with a kick to the chest. She glared at her 2 former friends and her anger growing as the fight went on. Why were they here? What caused them to betray her? Those thoughts raced through her mind as they fought. She was pulled out of her thoughts as she dodged away from May's knives. She then barely dodged Ty Lee's attack on her arm. She put some distance between herself and the duo, panting a bit from their exchange. Ty Lee looked at Azula with sadness. Azula, please, she said as she lowered her arms. We just want to talk. Azula just growled. There is nothing to talk about, she spat back, not lowering her stance. She charged forward, her attack aimed at May. May dodged to the side, but Azula was hit by Ty Lee's attack, making her arm go limp. She put some distance between them, not wanting to be taken out by Ty Lee once again. Azula, May stated as she aimed her knives at her. Calm down. Never. She shouted, you left me. Why? I needed you. Ty Lee looked at her with sadness. You didn't listen to us, she stated, you never took into account what we wanted. May lowered her knives. You are the one who left us, she said in her emotionless tone. Azula growled, small tears pouring down her face. You chose to leave me, she replied, her emotions getting the better of her. You left me, you didn't care for me. You are just like my mother, you never cared at all. All those memories we had mean nothing. Ty Lee started to cry. We do care for you, she stated with conviction. We just wanted to stop you from doing something you regret. Enough talk. Azula screamed and charged forward, ready to remove Ty Lee and May completely from her life. Ty Lee dodged to the side as Azula tried to sweep her legs out from under her. She frowned as her friends stood there panting in rage. None of their words reached her as she continued to attack. Ty Lee was pulled from her thoughts as she dodged a high kick to the face and was about to counterattack when Azula put some space between them. Mai stood next to Ty Lee, her knives at the ready. What do we do? She asked her bubbly friend as she threw several knives at Azula to keep her at bay. Ty Lee looked at Mai with a worried look. I don't know. She replied. We just need to stop her from attacking and go from there. Mai nodded and was about to start another attack on Azula when she heard a familiar voice fill the air. She turned and saw Toph flying towards them at amazing speeds. She and Ty Lee jumped back as Toph landed. Toph slowly got to her feet, stumbling a bit. That hurt. She stated with annoyance in her voice, spitting a bit, which had a slight red tint to it. She stomped her foot on the ground and launched 10 rocks into the air. She turned to Mai and Ty Lee. We need to go now. Ty Lee looked at Toph with confusion. Why? She asked. She heard the rush of the wind and saw the boy that was Protect Azula appear in front of them, looking as if nothing had happened. Toph pointed at him and frowned. He's why, I can't hit him and he can do crazy magic stuff. The boy cracked his knuckles as he stared at the trio with anger. Azula was behind him, her anger still evident in her eyes, yet she had not moved. You three will stand down and be taken in. Mai frowned. We need to speak with Azula. She stated in a diplomatic tone. If he was powerful enough to make Toph worry, she needed to be cautious. The boy just stared at her with suspicion and confusion, not moving from his place in front of Azula. Why did you not go to the Hokage and present yourself to her? He said, his voice biting at Mai's words. If you were here to talk, you would have gone through the proper channels. Toph just stomped her foot, rock shooting up next to her. We don't have time for that. She stated in annoyance. Then attacking her was the best course of action, he countered, making the confidence Toph extrude falter a bit. Princess Azula is currently under the protection of this village. As a leader of a foreign power, we have offered her asylum. With you three attacking her, you have just made yourself enemies of Konoha. I must detain you three for questioning by the Hokage and the I/T department to see what your true intentions are. Toph just shook her head. How about no to all that and you hand Azula over to us? Ty Lee put a hand on Toph's shoulder. We do not need to fight. She stated as she walked forward slowly. We came to talk, so we will talk. We are sorry for the misunderstanding, but we truly wish to speak with Azula. We are her friends. You are no friends of mine. Azula spat at Ty Lee, her eyes burning in rage and sadness. Friends do not betray each other. Ty Lee gave her a pleading look. We had no choice, she stated, her word filled with anguish. You were going to kill I couldn't allow you to do that. She chose Zuko over me, Azula countered. She showed where her true loyalty laid. She was to be removed for her betrayal. If you killed her, I know you would have felt so much anguish in your soul, Ty Lee stated, tears starting to flow from her cheeks. You were going to break at that moment if I let you go through with it. Azula looked at Ty Lee and suddenly began to laugh. It started off slow but began to build into a hollow laughter of sadness and rage. I would have broken, she said finally after the laughter died. Talking step towards Ty Lee, she stopped only a foot away from Ty Lee, her eyes looking directly into the girl before her. Unfortunately for you, Ty Lee, I broke. Azula brought her palm back and slammed into Ty Lee's chest, the sound of a bone break filling the air. Ty Lee stumbled back, the look of surprise on her face from the force of the attack. Ty Lee quickly reacted as she dodged Azula's next attack, but stumbled from pain from her broken ribs. Azula continued her attack and brought her leg up, high and dropping it down towards Ty Lee's head. She was stopped when large rock hit her in the shoulder, sending her sprawling to the ground. She saw Toph with her foot planted firmly on the ground with more boulders next to her. Azula stood quickly, the rage of her lost vengeance evident on her face. Toph launched another rock at her, which was dodged, but she failed to notice a second rock coming at her quickly. An orange blur quickly appeared in front of Azula and stopped the rock with a punch. Enough, Azula's protector shouted. Azula looked at him, Naruto, she stated, her anger subsiding a bit. Naruto just looked at Azula, a warm smile appearing on his face. It will be okay, he told her with assurance. These people will be dealt with, and you are safe. Azula slowly nodded, the angry still in her eyes. Just make them go away, she told him, turning away, flanked by one of his previous clones, her body still tense in anger. Naruto just nodded and he turned to look at Ty Lee, and Toph. I will ask you again to stand down, he stated in a level tone. Or I must do it by force. Toph frowned at his words. She had fought him for a moment and got her butt handed to her, but they needed Azula. Sorry, but how about no? Toph stomped her foot hard on the ground, launching a barrage of large boulders at him at rapid speeds. Naruto smiled, the hard way it is then, he stated and made a cross-shaped sign with his hands. The boulders reached him and smoke covered the area. Mai looked at Toph. Did you get him? She asked as she had several knives at the ready. Toph just shook her head, not even close. The smoke clear and standing before them were 5 Narutos, each ready to attack. Mai looked at Ty Lee with shock but was quickly brought out of her shock as she dodged Naruto's attack. She tried to retaliate but lost sight of him as he punched her directly in the stomach. Mai's eyes widened as she was sent flying back. She felt as she was hit by a boulder, her ribs breaking as she landed on the ground. Ty Lee cried as she dodged the other clone of Naruto, her flexibility the only thing keeping her from getting hit. Yet she faltered and took a hit to the shoulder, making her sprawl on the ground. Toph stomped her foot hard, pulling the 2 girls towards her. She watched Naruto as he charged, twisted her hands and brought up 5 levels of thick earth walls all around them. She let out a small sigh, but quickly reacted as Naruto came from above. Crap, she shouted as she dodged out of the way of his attack, sending several rocks at him to keep him busy. Mai looked at Toph. We need to get out of here, she stated as she slowly stood up, looking at Ty Lee. We can't fight him. Ty Lee nodded but frowned, but we need Azula, she replied, the sadness evident in her voice. We need to help her. We can't help her if we are captured, Mai countered. We need a better plan. Ty Lee just nodded, clearly not happy with the situation and how it had played out. They didn't have time to think when 5 clones came at them at once. Mai could barely get one knife out, hit a clone, and dodged to the side. Ty Lee was not so lucky and was grabbed by one of the clones, pinning her to the floor. Toph was not faring better than Mai and Ty Lee. Naruto had her on constant guard as he continued to attack relentlessly. She kept sending rock after rock at him, but it didn't stop him in the slightest. She didn't have time to think of a plan when she felt him hit her across the face. Okay, I think it's time to go, she stated as she groaned in pain, standing as fast she could. She stomped her foot to find Mai and Ty Lee. Mai was fighting and Ty Lee was pinned to the ground by one of the clones. Toph growled and stomped her foot hard, sending the earth around her in a large shockwave, sending everyone in the area flying. She then saw that clone disappear from Ty Lee and made her way over to her companions. She stomped her foot. Get in the hole, she shouted as she shot rocks flying toward a large group of clones running towards them. Mai nodded and she went to grab Ty Lee and threw her in. Toph felt the two enter the hole and smiled, stomping her foot once more, creating a large cloud of smoke, then made her way into the hole. Later, copy boy, she stated as she closed the hole behind her. Naruto, not one to give up, as the hole closed, formed a big ball Rasengan in his hand and drove it into the ground where they once stood, creating a large crater from the attack. Yet there was no one there. He pulled out a kunai and threw it in the air, letting the ANBU know that there was trouble, and made his way over to the clearly emotional Azula. She sat on their porch, her head down, body shaking, the heat of her anger and rage rolling off her in nearly visible waves. He sat down next to her, finally getting a good look at her face. She was clearly angry, but tears seemed to be falling from her eyes at a steady rate. I hate them, she stated, breaking the silence, her tone clearly distraught. I hate them so much. Naruto slowly drew the girl into his arms, pulling her into his chest, worried about her words. With Mai, Ty Lee, and Toph. Toph opened the hole, allowing Mai and Ty Lee to walk out slowly. Both were injured and barely able to move. Toph set a wave out to make sure the coast was clear, and helped the two injured girls move and lean against some trees. That did not go as planned, Toph stated, only to receive a small glare from Ty Lee. What? Mai sighed, but grimaced in pain. We didn't really plan, she replied. Toph nodded. So what do we do now? We need to go back, Ty Lee said. We need to go to Azula. We can't, Toph countered, walking over to Ty Lee. She is protected by that boy who can make copies of himself and stuff. We won't get close. I don't care, Ty Lee replied as she slowly stood and tried to walk but couldn't. She needs to know that we didn't mean to hurt her. She needs us. Mai stumbled over to her usually bubbly friend and pulled her into a hug. "We can't right now," she stated in her usual flat tone. "We can say sorry next time." Ty Lee let her mask drop and tears began to run down her face. "I want to tell her I'm sorry," she said through her tears. A few days later with Naruto and Azula. Naruto stood next to Azula as they went through their respective kata, the morning rays washing over them. After the girls had left, Yoshino and Shikamaru showed up, and soon the entire village was on high alert for the three girls. They had yet to be found by Tsunade was already putting together a team to track them down and bring them in for questioning. This was good news to Naruto, but as he looked at Azula as she went through her katas he couldn't help but worry. She had become more distant to him and her could feel the rage roll off her as if it was a storm. For the past several days she had done nothing but train and eat. She missed her session with Inoichi, stating she didn't want to take up his time and that she was fine. Yet Naruto knew she was not. As they finished the kata, she saw several strands of hair in her face and growled in anger. "Not good enough," she stated and began the kata again. Naruto stopped and looked at her. "It was fine," he told her, only for her to glare at him. "It was not," she stated, her anger rising. "I need perfection, I need to destroy those who hurt me, and that was not good enough." Naruto frowned, not liking this part of Azula at all, and stood before her blocking her way. "You're done," he stated with authority. Azula looked up at him. "I say when I am done." "You are not thinking clearly," he countered. "You are letting your anger get the better of you." "This is none of your concern," she countered as she balled her fist. "Now out of my way." She threw a punch and hit Naruto directly in the face with all her might. Yet it only turned his head. He looked at her with caring eyes, and this made Azula even more angry. "He doesn't know what I've been through," she thought to herself as she threw another punch at him, wanting to make him fall before her. "I need to be prefect so nothing can hurt me." Suddenly the voice of Ozai filled her mind, his laughter becoming louder and louder. "Azula, Azula, Azula," he stated in a condescending voice. "You are showing your true colors, show those who are not needed their place." Azula slowly found herself agreeing with her father. "Just burn him away," he told her, "show them all who you really are." She let out a large scream and started to throw punch after punch at Naruto, as he stood there not moving, taking all her attacks. He did not fall as she continued her assault like an animal possessed. "Why won't you fall?" she cried as tears started to stream down her face. "Why must you be in the way? Why must I feel pain?" Azula's next punch was barely had power behind it when she felt Naruto catch her wrist gently. She felt the pull as he surrounded her form with his own. She struggled in his grip, wanting to get away. The warmth was too much for her, yet he held firm. They stood together in silence, letting the cries of sadness fade into the air.